You're standing in line for coffee, phone in hand, scrolling without really seeing anything. And when the barista calls your name, you feel a slight jolt, as if you were pulled back into your body. And for a brief second, you wonder how long you were gone, even though you never consciously decided to disconnect in the first place. And this moment feels trivial until you realize how often your day unfolds this way. Think about how many times you open an app without remembering why, how often you respond to messages automatically, how frequently you move through familiar routines while believing you're actively directing each step, and ask yourself a quiet question. When did you actually choose to do any of this? The unsettling answer begins to surface when you notice that action almost always comes before explanation. As soon as your eyes catch movement on the screen, your sensory cortex is already decoding shapes and contrast while the thalamus filters incoming information to prioritize what feels relevant, and before you experience a clear thought, like I'll check this now, the basal ganglia have already matched the situation to a learned pattern, selecting a response that has worked before. That response feels personal because it carries your history, your habits, your preferences, but it doesn't require conscious permission. You might assume that awareness is leading, yet awareness is often catching up. This becomes clearer when something interrupts the flow, when the line stops moving or your phone freezes, and you feel irritation rise in your chest before you even understand why. That feeling reflects activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, which detects conflict between expectation and reality, signaling that the automatic system encountered resistance. Only then does conscious attention fully engage, not because it was absent before, but because it's most noticeable when it's needed to resolve error. As you walk to work or sit down at your desk, intending to focus, notice how easily your attention drifts, how you check email or news without deciding to, and how quickly you justify it afterward with a story that sounds reasonable. Those justifications feel honest, yet they are often constructed after the behavior has already unfolded, with the prefrontal cortex stepping in to organize events into a coherent narrative that preserves the feeling of control. This narrative is powerful because it creates continuity, linking actions to intentions even when the link was never consciously forged. You experience this again in conversation, when words leave your mouth faster than you can plan them, when you laugh at the right moment or adjust your tone automatically and only later reflect on what you said. Social behavior depends on rapid coordination between emotion, memory, and motor preparation, processes that unfold too quickly for conscious direction. The insula integrates subtle bodily signals that shape how confident or uncertain you feel, while the amygdala scans for emotional relevance, influencing reactions before you register them. By the time you're aware of your response, it has already happened, yet the sensation of control remains intact. Why does this sensation persist so convincingly? Because the brain prioritizes smooth functioning over accurate. Conscious awareness evolved not to micromanage behavior, but to create a stable sense of agency that allows learning, prediction, and social coordination. The hippocampus plays a role by weaving experiences into memory, reinforcing the idea that actions flow logically from decisions, even when the underlying process was fragmented and automatic. As the day continues, you make countless small choices about what to eat, what to read, what to ignore, and most of them feel deliberate simply because you can explain them afterward. But explanation is not the same as initiation. Control, as it turns out, may not be a process unfolding step by step, but a sensation that arises when prediction and outcome align smoothly. When they don't, when something unexpected happens, awareness surges and you feel more in control, even though that feeling signals disruption rather than mastery. This realization opens a tension that lingers beneath everyday life. If control is something you feel rather than something you execute continuously, then what is actually guiding behavior most of the time, and how much of your day is shaped before you ever notice it? That tension follows you into the next day, especially when you start noticing how often intention and action drift apart. Like when you plan to avoid distractions yet find yourself pulled toward familiar digital patterns. And you might wonder whether this means something is wrong with your discipline, or whether the environment itself is quietly steering you. The answer becomes clearer when you recognize that the brain is fundamentally predictive, constantly using past experience to anticipate what will happen next. And these predictions guide behavior long before conscious intention has a chance to intervene. Large-scale brain networks coordinate this balance between efficiency and flexibility. And in familiar environments, efficiency usually wins. The basal ganglia favor actions that reduce uncertainty and conserve energy, while dopamine signals highlight cues associated with expected reward or information, nudging attention toward what feels immediately relevant. This doesn't feel like loss of control. It feels like preference, because prediction masquerades as choice. The The default mode network supports the internal narrative that feels like you replaying memories, imagining futures, and maintaining identity, while TATS-focused networks engage when novelty or challenge demands attention. The sensation of control emerges when these systems align. When predictions match, reality and behavior flows without resistance. But when predictions fail, awareness sharpens, and you feel more present, more deliberate. Precisely because the system is updating, this is why moments of surprise or error stand out so vividly in memory. Think about a time when you acted out of character or felt an emotion that didn't fit the situation. And notice how quickly your mind searched for an explanation. That search reflects the prefrontal cortex working to preserve coherence, filling gaps in the story to protect the sense of a unified self. The brain dislikes narrative breaks, and it will repair them, even if the repair is approximate. Over time, these repairs shape identity, reinforcing patterns that feel like personality traits rather than learned responses to past contexts. In modern life, this process is amplified by environments designed to align perfectly with predictive systems. Digital platforms reduce friction, reward familiarity, and present endless cues that fit learned patterns, making automatic behavior feel effortless and intentional. You're not being overridden. You're being matched. Conscious control still exists, but it operates as a limited resource, deployed when stakes are high or when habits no longer serve you. This reframing changes how you interpret moments of struggle or inconsistency, shifting them from moral failure to predictable outcomes of brain-environment interaction. It also changes how you view others, as you begin to see behavior less as a simple matter of will and more as a dynamic negotiation between history, context, and awareness. As this understanding deepens, the sensation of control becomes something you observe rather than assume, and you start noticing how it fluctuates with energy, stress, and predictability. The realization quietly expands. Control isn't something you lose or gain, but something that emerges under specific conditions. And recognizing those conditions may be the first step toward interacting with your own behavior more honestly. Once you begin seeing control as a sensation rather than a constant process, everyday life takes on a different texture. Because patterns you once took personally start to look structural, repeating across work, relationships, and attention itself. You notice how similar dynamics appear when you feel productive, distracted, confident, or uncertain, and how each state corresponds not to a single decision, but to a shifting balance between prediction, environment, and awareness. The brain is always negotiating, allocating resources based on perceived cost and reward, and consciousness steps in most clearly when that negotiation becomes visible. This perspective doesn't strip meaning from choice. It grounds it. When awareness is no longer burdened with the illusion of total control, it becomes more effective at what it actually does best: noticing patterns, updating predictions, and gradually reshaping behavior over time. Identity then becomes less about rigid traits and more about tendencies that can shift as contexts change. The hippocampus continues to weave experiences into memory, but the story it tells can become more flexible, less absolute. Modern environments will keep pulling on predictive systems, but understanding how that pull works creates space, not for constant resistance, but for selective engagement. You start to recognize moments when awareness matters most, when small adjustments compound into meaningful change, and when letting automation run is not failure but efficiency. This reframing subtly increases agency without demanding perfection, aligning expectation with reality. As you continue to observe your routines, distractions, and reactions through this lens, the sensation of control becomes quieter and more nuanced, no longer something you cling to, but something you understand. And that understanding naturally invites further exploration. Because once you see how deeply prediction shapes experience, it becomes hard not to wonder where else the mind is working ahead of awareness, quietly guiding the life you feel like you're steering.